ACM is the Association for Computing Machinery. There are chapters across the world, and we focus on getting students involved in CS, whether that be through committees or special interest groups, which are focused on specific technical areas.
All right, so I'll briefly go over the structure of this workshop. So first, we'll help you guys set up your coding environment and personal website. And then we'll jump into a quick overview of web dev, and then go into HTML, CSS, and JavaScript concepts and demos.
All right, so Alice, you can stop sharing screen. I'll take over from there. So we're going to be using a tool called Code Sandbox for today for the interactive portion of today's workshop. So what this is an online sandbox where you can write like web development, like front-end web dev code, and then immediately see that in the same window. So the only thing you need for this is to have a GitHub account. So I'm going to send. And if you haven't done so already, please create an account on GitHub. If somebody else, I can't access the chat right now for something. Okay, I got it. Also, the instructions that we're about to go over are the same instructions that are linked in the GitHub repo that I just sent, but I'll be doing a live walkthrough as well. So after you have created a GitHub account, navigate to this link that I just sent in the chat. This is a template repository, meaning that you can use it and use the same code in your own, any repository in your own account. So from your accounts, go to this repository and click on this Use This Template button. After doing so, enter whatever repository name you want. For the sake of this example, I'm just going to use the same name, which is going to be Web Dev Intro Workshop. Make sure that this is public for now, in case you want us to help you with anything. It doesn't matter whether or not you click to check include all branches. Click create repository. It's going to take a few seconds for it to be generated. And then after this is done, you should see all the same files from the original Hack for Effective UC repository on your own account. So the reason that we're doing this is that we want to use GitHub Pages to deploy a website. So GitHub Pages is a way to host basically any website that you want to, with any static files you want on your own, on a URL of your own on GitHub. And so to do this, you need to go to the settings tab of your GitHub repository. So if we go back to the main link, so from there, see this tabs right here. The rightmost one is settings. Then on this main page, scroll almost all the way down to the GitHub Pages section. You're going to need to change under the source area, change the source from none to main, and then leave this as is, leave it as root, and then hit save. So this is going to enable GitHub Pages for our repository. If you scroll back down to there after hitting save, you'll see that your site is ready to be published. Your URL is going to be different than mine, so it's going to be username.github.io/repository name. Right now, if we click on it, if you click on it, it may show this hello world text. It may say 404 site not found. If it does say 404, give it a few seconds, and then it should have this hello world template there. So as you make changes to your code and push them up to GitHub, it'll be automatically redeployed on this link, and you'll be able to see your changes deployed to a live website. So that's the GitHub portion of our instructions. Also, if you have any questions, any clarifications, feel free to leave them in the chat, and one of our other presenters can help you with that as well. So next, we need to set up the Code Sandbox portion. So in another tab, leave your GitHub tab open, but in another tab, go to codesandbox.io. I'm going to send that link in the chat here as well, so it'll be easier for everyone to access. I'm logged in. Let me log out real quick so that it'll be easier to, whoops. Okay, so from Code Sandbox, click on the sign-in page up in the top right. Why am I still logged in? Sorry, everyone. This is not. Anyway, you're going to see a button that lets you sign in from GitHub. What you're going to do there is just click that, use the same GitHub account that you used for, okay, it seems like Code Sandbox might be down. Wonderful. Great timing. Is it down for other people or is it just me? Can one of the other presenters try it as well?
It's working for me.
Okay, maybe it's just an account thing. I'm gonna just do it in an incognito tab so it goes faster. So, okay, so a few others are having issues with Code Sandbox. Okay, that is unfortunate. Okay. Okay, I think we're gonna have to switch over to Replit then, so we're not gonna have the GitHub integration, but yeah. So if Alice, you're probably a bit more familiar with Replit, so do you want to walk them through that then? Sorry guys, this is not supposed to happen. I'm guessing the Code Sandbox servers are having some issues, so we're not able to use their, so I think we're going to be using a different thing.
Wait, some people are saying that it's back up for them now.
I'll try refreshing. Okay, yeah, never mind, it seems to be working. Okay. All right, apologies for the delay. Okay, so I'm gonna sign out so that everyone gets a chance to see like the full workflow. So from like the main website of Code Sandbox, click on sign in and then sign in with GitHub. Okay, you might be prompted to manually sign in. If you're already signed in with GitHub, it might redirect you automatically. So from here, click on New Sandbox in your home page. You're going to be on this Create Sandbox tab, but instead you want to switch to Import Project. You'll see that there's a place to enter a GitHub repository URL. Use the repository of use the URL of the repository you created, not the template, the one that you created, and copy it into that. Then import and fork. It's going to take a few seconds. It's going to pull the code down from GitHub, and then it should have your sandbox ready. So this is going to resemble something like VS Code or any other text editor you might be familiar with, except you'll also have this window on the right, which has the like a live version of your website there. So here, if I change something, so we have our template with hello world. If I just add the words test and save, Control S or Command S, whatever it is on your system, you'll be able to see it reflected on the right as well.
Arpin, I think someone asked to repeat the last step.
Yeah, was it the creating the sandbox? Could you clarify which part? Yeah, so what you want to do is from home, create a new sandbox, import project, use the URL of the repository you just created on GitHub, copy that URL, paste it into this input, and then hit import and fork. So after you do that, you should see something like this here. So from this view, we'll see the different files. So we have an index.html file, which is our like structure, the JavaScript index.js file for scripts, and then index.css file for styling. We'll go over each of those in more depth later. The last thing you'll need to do for the setup is I'll link this with your GitHub. So this is a copy of your GitHub, but from Code Sandbox, you'll also be able to sync things to that as well. So on the left, you'll see that there's a bunch of different tabs. Right now, we're in the Explorer view, which is the files. Go to the third one from the bottom, which is the GitHub one. And from there, you'll click on the sign in button, which will prompt you to sign in with GitHub again. You might need to, again, manually log in, or it'll redirect after a few seconds. After that's done, you want to link your sandbox. This is going to actually that your URL isn't valid. Okay. Did you use the same GitHub that you used to, did you sign in with GitHub on the same account that you used to to make a template of the repo? Okay. The repo does have to be public. Make sure the repo is public. Otherwise, I don't think that Code Sandbox will have access to it. I can help individual people with the setup afterwards. As we're still going, we're close to the end, so I'm gonna do the final steps, and then we'll get to any outstanding questions. So click on this link Sandbox button. It will take a few seconds, and then everything should be synced up. From here, you'll have the same interface to like a user interface to make commits to GitHub. If you're familiar with the Git interface, then you'll know how this works. If not, anytime you make a change, for example, I added this test word, like just test to the end of my text here, and it's here. I can add it summary, so I'm going to say add test text and leave it as commit directly to main. You can choose to leave the description full or not, or as long as you have something in the summary, and then commit changes. So after this finishes loading, if you head over to your GitHub repo and refresh, you'll see that add test text, the changes I just pushed are synced with our GitHub. And if I use my link, it might take a minute or so to propagate, but after refreshing it a few different times, give it like a minute or so, you should see the test text show up.
Can you repeat the last step again?
The committing step?
Uh,
Can you clarify which one?
yeah. Yeah, the committing step.
Yeah, 1 second, sorry. Is this? Okay. I don't know why it's not propagating, strange. Okay, so if you go to, so I'm gonna make another change. So test, I'm gonna change the title to, in this here to, so if I make any change to any of my files, let's say my website, if on this left-hand side, still in the GitHub tab, if I want to sync this with my repository, basically push this to the cloud, then I will add any something to the summary to indicate what change I made. So I'm going to say update site title. It's going to have commit directly to the main branch, but check by default, leave that as is, and then hit commit changes. So now if we go here, so now test shows up. So the earlier change that we made, and then after a few more minutes, then the title will change as well. So after you push, it'll take a while for your changes to be updated on the URL, the github.io URL, but be patient with that. And then after a bit, it should be updated. Any questions right now? Jared, are you still having the issue with the URL? Okay. I can hop into a breakout room with you real quick to get that resolved. Any other questions, leave them in the chat, and then I'll resolve them. I can help you with that later as well. So with that, we're going to start with the lessons part of today's workshop, and then I'll hand it off to Alice, I think, to start us off.
We maybe get like a show of hands, like how many people have their stuff set up. Use the reaction or comment in the chat. There are also step-by-step instructions on the Hack for Impact repo. Let me send that.
Yeah, so maybe how about if you're still working on setting up the repo, maybe send a React so we can still see people are still working on that part. Okay, I don't see anything. Arpin, is Jared good to go?
Yeah, we're good to go.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. I think we can start the presentation now. All right, so what is web development? So web development is the building and maintenance of websites. So anything that you see that makes a website look good or perform well or work fast to create that seamless user experience makes up web development. So with web development, you can create anything having to do with just a plain page of text or even complex web-based applications like Facebook or Twitter. It also includes server and network security and e-commerce development. So it's kind of what helps businesses run. So why is web development important? Web development makes services more accessible and visible and helps businesses reach users, which is especially important in today's world where everything is online. Many different people with various backgrounds will be interacting with websites. So you can create things that help people everywhere. And then lastly, the internet is not going anywhere anytime soon, so we will always need websites.
Yeah, and I'll talk a bit about the different components of web dev. So there's the front end. So this is what the user sees on the page. It's also known as the user interface or the client. And then the back end is the liaison between the front end and the database. And it's also known as an API, which stands for Application Programming Interface or a server. And then you have your database, which is basically just where all your data is stored. And actually, database is essentially what a web app boils down to. So every single web application is just like a user interacting with some sort of data. So the front end and back end layers, they kind of abstract these interactions, make it easier to navigate and stuff like that. And so to give a brief description of like the user flow through the different parts of web dev. So when a user initiates an action on a web page that requires data to be retrieved or modified, the backend receives the request and retrieves, modifies the data in the database accordingly. And then it then returns the data back to the front end to update the page and then display the info to the user. And then these are the three main front-end languages. So the HTML is responsible for the elements and layout of the page. The CSS is the aesthetics, the styling of the page. And the JavaScript is interactivity and functionality.
Yeah, so don't worry if you didn't really understand what any of those acronyms meant. We'll be going into each of them very shortly and kind of teaching you how the different languages translate to what you see on the website. And we're starting off with HTML, which consists of elements and layout.
Oh, another thing I forgot to mention, today we'll solely be focusing on the front end aspect because a personal website usually doesn't need any other external data.
So what is HTML? It stands for Hypertext Markup Language, which isn't super helpful in itself to help you understand what it means. But the basic idea is that all web pages are written in HTML. So if you see something like a website, it's not just like magically there. It's not just magically like some kind of picture that's sent to you. Underlying that front-end website is actually all HTML code. So you can think of it as like the framework slash the structure of a web page. And so what happens when you kind of go to a website is you get the HTML code, and then your browser renders that HTML code into the website that you see in front of your eyes. So that's kind of what HTML does. And the question now is, how do we write HTML, and what kind of language is HTML? So HTML is written in tags. And we'll get into more of that in the next couple of slides. But the basic idea is that every element has an opening tag and a closing tag. For example, there's something called a div tag. And you write HTML code, for example, by writing the div tag, writing some other HTML code, and then closing that div with the closing div tag. And there are all sorts of different HTML tags, and they all do different things based on what they are and also kind of what attributes you pass into them. And this will be a little bit more clear when we go over the examples.
So these are some examples of some really common tags. You have header tags and then paragraph tags. So on the right side, you can see how like the different tags make the text appear differently. And so there's like lots of different header tags. There's like H1, H2, H3, and so on. And like you can use those to style your page. So this is an example of a link tag, which is also very useful. So the A signifies that. And so href is the URL to whichever link you wanted to point to. And so on the right side, you can see how when you click here, it'll take you to the Hack for Impact website. Another important tag to know is the image tag. And so this is how you can insert images into your page. So there's like two ways to do that. The first way on the top is providing a URL to an image on the web. And then the second way is to provide a local path to an image that you have stored. And so both of those work.
So we also have div tags, which Albert mentioned earlier. You can think of a div as a container, so there's no visual component associated with it. You see the picture on the right, it kind of has like a box, so everything that is within the div tag appears like that. So a div tag usually defines like a division or a section within an HTML document. So you can use that container to then style it with CSS.
All right, so now we'll start with building up the HTML for your personal websites. So I'm gonna stop sharing real quick. And give me one more second. Okay, can everybody see this? Yeah. All right, cool. Actually, wait, we'll start with this first. So this is a tool called Balsamiq, and it's a design tool. It's usually used for like a low fidelity, which means like it's kind of like a work in progress still. It doesn't look like as professional as like other technologies that are used for design, but it's good to just start out if you have some basic designs in mind. And there's a lot of like pre-made assets too that you can use. So this is what our website demo is going to look like. So just so you have an idea of what we're trying to make. So we're going to have this navigation bar that takes you to 4 different pages. The home page is just going to have like your name, an image of you, and like a short description. And then we have your experiences page. So we'll list like some different paragraphs on this page describing like what you've done. And about me has your interest in your hobbies in 2 different columns. And then contact has like a short little form, and then your social media links. Yeah. So now we'll move on to the actual demo. So yeah, so go to your Code Sandbox repository, and then you'll see, I'll briefly describe like how Code Sandbox works. So you see all your files on the left here, and you can click on any one of them to navigate to it. And then you have your code editor in the middle. And then to your right, you have what it will look like in the browser. And this is like a smaller version of it. So if you want it to be full page view, you can open it in a new window, and you can see it expands to the whole window. All right, cool. So yeah, let's get started. First, we're going to make the nav bar. So I'm just going to get rid of this. Okay, so we're going to contain the nav bar within a div. So we're going to use a div tag, and then we'll write the closing div tag first. And then within the div tag, we're going to have 4 links. So in HTML, links are denoted as an A tag. So if we use A, and then href is the link you want it to direct to. And we're just going to use hashtag for this, which just means like the current page, class, or like the home page. Class equals disabled. So this just means that whichever page you're on, it will not let you click on that link because you're already on that page. And then this will be home. So let's just see what that looks like right now. Yeah, so you have a link and it's called home, and it takes you to, or this is kind of just like a dummy thing, just like, because you're not supposed to navigate, you're not supposed to be able to click this link when you're on that certain page. So you see like the disabled doesn't show up yet. We'll change that when we add in CSS. But for now, we're just going to focus on the elements and the layout. So I'm going to type in some more. So this one will be the About Me link. So we'll call it About Me, ending A tag. And then you see this link corresponds to, we didn't make the pages yet. Hold on. Okay, let me just make the pages really quickly. Oops. Okay, so back here, you see this corresponds to the name of the file that's in the same, we call it directory, as your current file. So directories are basically just folders. You see like everything, we don't have any folders right now, but if we wanted to contain, like, let's say we wanted to have the about.html file within its own folder, we would need to use the correct path for it. So if it was in a folder called like pages, we would need to make this URL, pages/about.html. And if we want to navigate, let's say about.html was in a folder that is, or let's say index.html, this current file was in a folder, and we wanted to get to the about page, which is outside of that folder, then to navigate out of a folder, we use // Yeah, but that's not really important right now because everything is within the same folder, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay, and I'll just do all the other pages. Experience, and then last one is contact. Okay, cool. So that is our nav bar for now. It looks very plain, but yeah, if you can see, like, since we don't have anything on the other pages, it just disappears. So we know that it's navigating correctly, at least. Okay. So now we'll make the actual like header part of the page. So this is the part. That has your name and an image of you, and then a short description. So we're going to use the H1 tag for a large header, and then we're going to use the image tag. And I'm going to try to upload a local file, but my Finder doesn't work sometimes, so we're just gonna see if I can do it. Okay, I think it will work. Okay, awesome. So I just uploaded a picture of me. Oh, that is very large. Okay. It was on my desktop. I just uploaded it to the editor. And so similarly to the href, we're just going to give the image a source. And we're going to put me.jpg. And image is a special tag. It's a self-enclosing tag. So because it doesn't need any text associated with it, there is no like separate opening and closing tags. Yeah, and then one last thing, we're going to have a paragraph tag. And then I'm just gonna copy over the short description. Okay, let's see what this looks like. Okay, yeah, you see the image is still very massive. Oh gosh, okay. So a quick fix right now, we're gonna change this later. We can give it a height and a width, and this corresponds to pixels. So like 250 pixels by 250, just so that we can see the rest of the page. Yeah, there we go. So that's our very basic home page for now. And yeah, I'll let Shrestha take over for the next page, and I'll copy and paste like this part over too.
Okay, so now we're going to do the about page. And so the only thing with the nav bar that will really change is that since we're on the about page, about me should not link to anything, whereas home should take us back to home. So I'll change that. Okay. And so the about me page can have like anything like hobbies, interests. So I'll start off with just a title. And then I'll add some more information. Let's see. Okay, so I'll add like a list of interests and then a list of hobbies. So if you want a list, you can use like an unordered or an ordered list. So right now I'll use an unordered list. So that'll give us like bullet points. So I'll make another container for that. And so, lists can have like LI, which is like a list item. Okay, so yeah, so it'll show up as bullet points. And so we can give this list a title. We can just say interests. Then we could say like, for now, it's like music, sports. And then we can have another list. So I'm just going to copy this and say hobbies. And we'll do pretty much the same thing. Painting. So these are just some random ones. And then if you wanted a numbered list, you would use the OL tag, and that stands for ordered list. So it'll put numbers. Yeah, and so later we can work on styling this better and putting it into like 2 columns and making it look kind of neater.
All right, Shagun, do you want to talk about experience?
Yeah. So maybe Alice, could you go back to the balsamic link real quick so I can explain the accordion? So for the experience page, what we want to do is create like a accordion container. So essentially what that will do is if you click on something like projects, it'll expand that window and you can read more about that there. So first we're going to start with the HTML portion of it. So the kind of like closing and opening of the accordion will not be done right now. So yeah, let's get started. So if you go to the, Alice, could you go back to the code? Yeah. So we already have our nav bar in there. So what we want to do now is start with creating a header to call this page projects or experience. And then we're going to close that. So the accordion is comprised of multiple buttons that you will click. So we're going to use a button tag here. And right now we'll give it a class name of accordion so that we can later do some styling with it. And we can just call this experience 1. Then we're going to close that button tag. And then within that, we're going to create a div called class panel, because this part is going to have different styling as compared to the button. And then within that, we want to put the text of like what your actual experiences are. So I will just copy paste some text that we can use. So let's say that that is your first experience. So now we want to close that div tag. And then we can create multiple just like this. So you can have multiple experiences listed on there. And all you want to do is change the names. You can keep the class names the same because they are all going to be styled in the same way. And then we can just add one more. So Alice, could you run this and show us what it looks like? Yep, so now you see that you have 3 buttons called Experience 1, 2, and 3, and then you have text within that. And then when we get to the JavaScript portion of this, we will show you how to open and close those buttons so that text is hidden when the accordion is closed or open. So yeah, that's about it for the experience page. Albert, if you want to take over.
Yeah, so we can move on to the contact page now. Maybe I can copy and paste, or yeah, you can copy and paste. Let's go back to the Balsamiq and see what it looks like, just as a refresher. So this will be a little bit different from the other pages in that you can see that we have this kind of form, and there are inputs, there are labels for those inputs. And so this will require the use of input tags, which we have not done so far. So that's something unique, and let's just get right into it then. So the first thing, I'm just going to change the navbar so that it correctly only is disabled for the contact page. Or actually, I'll just leave that for now. But okay, so we have the right navbar. And what we want to do now is we want to create these forms and these inputs. So we can use the input tag, but before that, let's use the form tag. And the form tag, it doesn't actually display anything. Everything that goes inside is actually what's going to be displayed, but it will kind of, if you're actually submitting something, it will collect those values for you inside your form and will help you with making sure that the correct values are submitted to whatever you're trying to do. So inside our form, we're going to have an input, and we'll define the class as input, type as text. We'll give it ID equals name and name equals name. And these are just kind of specifiers so that the form can identify what value what input it's taking the value from. And so if we reload now and see what this page looks like, if we go to the contact page, you'll just see an empty kind of blank text field. So that's what the input tag gives us. And if you remember from our design, we want 3 of these, and we want a name, email, and message input. So let's copy and paste over. So actually, I'm just going to copy and paste one over, and we're going to change. Actually, let's get rid of this for now. That's CSS related. We're going to change ID equals name to email, and name equals name to email. And we're also going to add labels to these inputs. So we want, instead of just an empty text box, we want a label. And our label will be name. And for our email, we'll have a label that's email. And one other neat tag is the BR tag. So that's just to insert a line break in between these two things so that they're not on the same line, because we want them to be on different lines. So you can see now we have a name and email form. The last one we want is a message, but the message can be a little bit bigger because if we want to allow people to type in a bigger message. So instead of just using the regular input tag, we're going to use a tag called text area. And this is similar to the input tag, except it's just going to be this bigger text box. And if we reload here, oops. We'll see that the form now has our 3 fields, message, name, and email. And the message field is a little bit bigger than the other 2 because it's a text area field instead of the name, instead of just a regular input. So a couple of final things. Let's just add, the original design had a contact me big header at the top. So we'll add that as well. And there are also some images. So like Alice mentioned, we can do that with the image tag. And I've already pre-found some of social media images, so I'll just copy and paste those in. But you can use kind of any images that you want. So if, for example, this one is going to be a big LinkedIn image. And it's right now, it's really big, the same problem that Alice had. So instead of having it be that big, let's just make the width a little bit smaller. And this will be a temporary fix so that we can see everything on the page. And we're going to copy in, our original design had, Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat. So the same thing. These are all links that I found beforehand for those images. And similar, we're going to set the width to like 25 for all of these. And finally, if we refresh our page, go to our contact me page, we're going to have contact me, a name, email, message, and those 4 social media images that we see below. So this is, oh, also we should add a button. I forgot about that. So what we can do is a button is also something that we can do using the input tag. Let's see, and instead of having, so our previous input tags had the class text, or had the type text, sorry. But this time we're going to give the input tag the type of submit. And when we do that, it's going to be changed from the text field to a submit button instead. And we can refresh and see that we have a submit button. So all of these things are kind of clumped together and not very pretty looking, which is what we'll deal with in terms of when we use CSS to make it actually look like in a presentable manner. And actually, to be clear, these images don't do anything actually yet. So if we wanted them to link to an actual website, we could wrap them in a link tag. So give it like something like this. And this actually, so this will not work because it thinks that we're in the current directory, but if you open it in like a separate tab it should go to linkedin.com if you open it in a separate tab, because it's blocked in Code Sandbox. But yeah, so that's how you can actually attach links to these things, so that you can click on them and go to the website. And so that's pretty much it for the HTML of the contact page. And I guess now we can go back to the presentation and talk about the CSS concepts, so you guys can learn how to actually style your pages.
All right, also, I'll send the link to the Balsamiq cloud project so that you guys can take a look at the designs on your own too. Okay. Someone asked if they could see the code in the Experience tab again. Sure. Did you have any specific questions about it?
So if you see like lines 20 to 23, those are all just repeated because you're kind of putting the same thing multiple times.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on to CSS? In the contact.html, how is there a box after name?
So I can explain that. The input tag in contact.html is what's going to create that box. So if you look at the code, it says there's a label, which is the name, and then the input tag, which comes right after it. Yeah.
And also, I think someone asked, why do we need input type equals submit for the submit button?
Yeah, so the type kind of specifies that this should be like a submit button kind of thing, because it's the same input tag, right? The only difference is that when we did type equals text and type equals submit, it changed from this field to a button. And to actually submit this like kind of form, there would be some more work involved, which we won't go into in this workshop. But yeah, the general idea is that it just changes the input tag. And it is a submit button for the form.
And then someone wanted to see the about page really quickly. All right, awesome. So I think we'll move on to CSS now. Go back here. Okay, yeah, so CSS, again, it controls the aesthetics of the web page. And yeah, so what is CSS exactly? It stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Again, it controls the design and styling of a web page, and it describes how HTML elements are displayed on the screen. So how do you write CSS, and like what is the syntax for it? So CSS is comprised of selectors and properties. So the selector selects which HTML element you want to style. So if you saw in the code, you might have seen like this like attribute called class equals something. So that allows you to select the element that has that class and style it. So we'll get into that more in the demo and on the further slides. And then the second part of CSS is the properties. So what are the style components that you actually want to modify? And it's kind of like a dictionary, I guess, if you worked with like Python dictionaries or like objects, you have like a property name or like a key and the value associated with it. And I'll show you what that looks like more on the next slide. Yeah, so here you can see this part is the HTML. And then here we have the styling for it now. So if you see, like we don't have any classes here, and that's because you can also style the tag name directly. So that means like every single H1 tag will have these properties, which usually you don't want to do because it's like a little bit too broad for what you want. Like you don't want everything to have the same style sometimes. So yeah, just for an example, first example, we're just styling the tags directly. And you can see like the body has a background color of moccasin. The body isn't in this example, but body, usually write all of your code within the body tag. So when you select the body tag, you're basically affecting all the code. And the body is also kind of like a div that wraps everything on the page. So as you can see, like this color choice is probably not the best, but it's like a slightly tannish color. And then, yeah, for the H1 tag, we made it bigger, we made it salmon color. H2, you can also change the alignment of elements on the page. So we centered it. And then for the P tag, we changed the font type. So it looks a little bit different from like the classic Times New Roman. And yeah, this is not exactly centered, but pretend is centered. Yeah. And then for CSS classes, so here we're attaching a class called blue to the H1 tag. And then in the CSS, we select it using this dot notation. So if you go back, actually, oops, if I go back, actually, I know how to go back. Okay. Here you see there's no dot in front of these selectors because we're selecting the tag. But when we have the dot, that means we're selecting the class name. And then we're just setting the font color to blue, and yeah, it shows up as blue. Yeah. And then, so this won't affect all H1 tags, only the ones that have the class name of blue. So you have a little bit more control in what you want to style. And then an even more specific attribute would be CSS IDs. So here you can see we have the class of blue again applying to this P tag, and then we have a class of blue and an ID of red applying to this P tag. So you might be able to guess what the ID does based on what it outputs. So blue still makes, or like the blue class still makes the text blue, but when we give it an ID, and the corresponding selector is the hashtag that corresponds to an ID selector, that will actually trump whatever the class is. So it will be red instead of blue, and indeed it shows up as red. So yeah, IDs are meant to be for, oh wait, Shagun, this was sorry. All right.
No, it's okay. I'll just add a little bit to it. Yeah, so Alice mentioned that you can see that both of them have the class that equals blue, but the ID for the second one is red. So the ID will trump the class, it'll override it. So in the picture, you see that the second sentence is red. So yeah, I want to note that the ID selector, which is like at the bottom left corner, you see the picture that uses the ID selector. It uses the ID attribute of an HTML element to select a specific element. So the difference between a class and an ID, although they have kind of similar functionalities, is that an ID is used for single elements that appear on a page. Something that might appear once would be like a header or a footer or a menu, whereas a class is used for multiple elements that appear on a page. So like a link or paragraphs can be styled with classes. Yeah, so next we have text styling. So this is going to kind of change how any words on your page look. So if you see in the bottom left picture, there are different attributes like font size, color, text shadow. So these are just going to change how your whatever container your text is in, that's what it's going to change. So if you were to change font family to, I don't know, like Times New Roman, then your font would change. If you were to change font size from 2 to 10, that would become bigger. And REM is just the unit that the font goes by. And then, color has the hex value over there, and same with text shadow, it will change based on whether you increase it or decrease the number. And then we also have padding and margins. So if you were to put some paragraph or anything into a div and use the margin top, margin left, and then the different various padding attributes, you could change how much space is surrounding it. So padding increases the size inside of the HTML element, whereas margin adds spaces outside of the HTML element. So like the first picture on the right, it says example of a margin. If you were to increase margin top from 5 to 10, then the text would be shifted down. And then same thing for padding.
All right, now we'll move into the CSS portion of the demo. So let me exit out of this. Oops, don't look at that. Okay, and we'll start with the home page, so index.html. And let's go back here. So first, let's just add in some more space between, or just like some more white space around the entire page, because it's looking a little bit crammed right now on the left side, especially. So the way we're going to do that is we're actually just going to select the body tag, and then we're also going to change the font a little bit. So, okay, here we're changing the font family to Arial, Helvetica if Arial is not working. And then we're setting the margins to 10 pixels and 20 pixels. So the first value corresponds to top and bottom margins, and then the second value corresponds to left and right margins. So let's see what this looks like now. Yeah, so you see the font's a little bit different, and there's a little bit more space on the sides. So next thing, we're going to change this nav bar. So if we go back to index.html, we're going to give this a class, and we'll call it navbar. And so now we can select that class in the CSS. So if we do navbar, and yeah, first thing we want to do is this overflow hidden. So yeah, actually, wait, let's hold off on that first. So let's just actually, never mind, we'll switch back. So this basically hides any overflowing content, and it puts the rest of this content on like a new line instead of being next to the nav bar, basically. It's hard to tell right now, but when we add in the other attributes, maybe it'll be easier to see. And then we want the nav bar to actually have a special property that lets you see like which page you're hovering over. So Oh, actually not yet. So we're going to style the A tags of the nav bar. So if you see here, we didn't cover this in the CSS part, but we have the class selector and we have this A selector. So basically you can even see like when I hover over it, this selects the element that corresponds to a class of navbar, and then it selects each A tag within that element. So this is a good way to get like nested elements and to not repeat it for like each A tag. We can just select them all at once in what that's only within the navbar. So we're going to do a couple of things here. So first we're going to float left. This just shifts all the links to the left, as opposed to like being centered or like shifted to the right. And then we're going to make the font black. And within each like link, we're going to have it be aligned within its own little section. And I think you'll be able to see that a little bit later after I add in some more stuff. And then for each A tag, we're going to add in some padding so that they're not so crammed. So let's give it a top bottom padding of 15 and then a left right padding of 20 pixels. And yeah, now it's a lot more spaced out. So that looks a little bit better. And then last thing we're going to do for, decoration. The link tags is we're going to remove the underlines and like the different colors when you've clicked on it. So yeah, now it looks like plain text. So now you might be wondering like, oh, how do they know that these are like links if you don't see any like underline with it under it? So that's where we're going to add in another special property. So we're selecting the navbar A tags once again, and then there's a property called hover. So when you hover over the A tag, you can make it do something. So we're just going to give it a background color of, this is just arbitrary. This is like a light gray color. And if you see, once you hover over it, it'll turn gray, which is very nice. And then a few more things. So yeah, now our navbar looks good. Yeah, actually, if you, hold on. Yeah, so now you can see what the overflow hidden does. If I remove it, then like the next element would be in the same line as the rest of the navbar. So we do need this. Okay. Okay, now we'll center the rest of the content on the page so that it looks a little bit nicer. So first, we're going to add in a header class. So I'm going to attach it to this div so that everything inside of it is centered. So I gave the div, which encapsulates everything else on the page, a class of header, and then in the CSS, I'm selecting header, and I'm doing text align center. So yeah, now that shifts everything to the center. It looks quite a lot better if you ask me. And then a few more smaller things. So for the description, oh, sorry, I should put these in I should make the classes first. We're going to add a class to the P tag called description. And we're just going to give it a little bit more of a margin around the sides. So we're using the margin property again, and we're giving it 20. Okay, that's not, it doesn't look very visible here, but it's a little bit more compact. Okay, and And then one last thing. So in our Balsamiq, you see like the image is circular, right? So we can actually do that with our own image. So if we go back to index.html, so, oh yeah, like I said, or I said before, we're going to get rid of this. So we're going to actually put this in the CSS. And we're going to instead give this a class called profile image. Okay, so yeah, now it exploded again. So we can fix that by using CSS. And instead of using like the equals with quotes, we're just going to set the properties. And then the way to make it circular is using the border radius property and giving it 50%. Okay, hold on. Oh, sorry, yeah. Yeah, there's supposed to be semicolons at the end, not commas. Okay. And also one more thing, you have to specify the units. So we're using pixels for this. And yeah, now it's circular and small again, and it looks a lot better than it did before. So we've accomplished our goal for this page. All right. And now Shrestha, go on to about.
Sure. Okay. So in the Balsamiq design, the About Me page was like in 2 separate columns. So first I'll do that. So to do that, we can assign, so we have interests and hobbies in like 2 separate containers. So we can give them like 2 different classes. So interests will be left, and then hobbies will be right. And so then we can go into the same CSS file, and we can add, we can change the style of those 2 containers. So we can say like, okay, so both of them will be very similar, except they'll be oriented a little bit differently. So first thing is that, so we'll assign it a width. So let's say like 250, and we'll do that for both. And then we'll also give it this property. And so let's see how that looks. Okay. Alice, can you refresh the page and then see how it looks? Okay, so you have 2 separate columns. Okay. And then let's also center the About Me text. So that will be, yeah, so I'll use the same class that Alice used in index.html. So I'll use that. And so that centers it. And so if we go back to index.css, let's say we want to add like a border around the 2 individual like interests and hobbies. So to do that, we can change the border style. So yeah, so this, so you can change the border style. So you can do like dotted, solid, dash. There's like different kinds of borders you can do. That's something you can play around with. And there's like other like styles that you can play around with on that page. But this is kind of how to get it into 2 columns. And you can add like more columns if you want to. Yeah, so that's it for About Me styling.
right, so next we'll be doing the styling for the experience. So yeah, so we're still gonna have some some functionality that will not appear with the CSS that we will do with the JavaScript. But for now, we are gonna start by styling the accordion using the class that we created earlier. We called that accordion. So everything that goes within that will be applied to that. Yeah, sorry, I need to just check that the names are the same. Okay, looks good. So let's set the background color to be like a light gray. So the hex value for that would be 3 E's. We can set the color of the text to be a darker gray. So 444. And then we can use this cursor attribute to make the your cursor like look like a pointer when it's hovering over the button. We can say the padding is 18 pixels. We can give the button a width of 100%. Let's not give a border for now. Let's align the text to the left. That's within the buttons. We don't want to give it an outline. How big do we want the letters to be? Let's go with 15 pixels for now. And then we can also give it a transition, so when you hover over it, it kind of has a transition of, let's do 0.4 seconds. So maybe Alice, could you save that and show us what it looks like? Yeah, so now you see that the background is light gray, the text is dark gray. When you hover over it, you can see that your mouse changes or your cursor changes, but the text is still visible, the lorem ipsum part, which is what is going to go within your accordion. And so that we will style in a little bit. So now we want to give the text within the accordion, the lorem ipsum part, some styling as well. So we used the class panel for that part. So what we can do here is give it padding as well. Display is going to be none. Background color, let's say that's, let's give that white. And then overflow is hidden. So yeah, let's see what that looks like, Alice. Awesome. So right now it's hidden. When you click on the button, it will show up, but not just yet because we haven't implemented the JavaScript portion. We can also change how it looks like when you hover over the accordion. So to do that, we can do .accordion.hover and just change the color of the background after you hover over it. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, so yeah, when we click on that, then you will see a difference in color. All right, so sorry?
I don't think it's working.
Oh, what?
Is this the right color?
I changed it to
You need a
DDD.
colon, not a period. Between accordion and
Oh,
hover.
you're right. Yeah, not a period. Okay, so let's put that back.
Also, in the interest of time, we should probably move on to the next to the final like wrap up section and keep that pretty short.
Okay, we can move on to JavaScript if that's all right with Albert. But yeah, now when you hover over it, it changes color.
Yeah. Okay, cool. The final thing that we are going to talk about is just JavaScript really quickly. We don't have a lot of demo plan for this because it's one of the more advanced functionalities. The basic idea of JavaScript is that it's going to give us a lot of interactivity with our website. If we go to the next slide, we can kind of see the things that it can do for us. It can give us event listeners. So basically the demo for JavaScript is going to be that it allows us to click on the accordion and it will expand. So that's something that you can do with JavaScript, which allows you to kind of dynamically update your page. JavaScript can be used for like a lot of other things as well. So for instance, HTTP requests. So if you are actually building a full stack development or full stack website and you need to send information to the backend, you need to send a request to the backend, you would use that you would do that using JavaScript. And finally, JavaScript is just also its own language. So it's a general scripting language. You can create a JavaScript file and you can run it and do all the things that maybe a script in Python could also do. So it's pretty powerful and versatile and takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's definitely one of the important parts to learning how to make your website even more dynamic than just kind of the static site that we have now. So do we want to really quickly do the demo for JavaScript or should we?
I think I can do it in like 2 minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, so first we want to start, if you could go to the experience.js file. Yeah, so make sure that your file ends with .js to indicate that this is a JavaScript file. So first,
Sorry, I think it needs to be index.js because it's linked to index.html.
okay, gotcha.
Or, oh, I guess, yeah, right here.
All right. Yeah, so we want to create a variable to return like a collection of all elements in the document. So to do that, we use, document.get elements by class name because we gave it the name accordion, the class name accordion. And so essentially this kind of creates an array-like structure almost. That might be a good way to think of it. So we want to just loop through that array. So acc.length I++. Then we are going to use the add event listener method to attach an event listener to the specified element. So an HTML event is something basically that a browser can do or that a user does. And then when you use this, scripts are automatically executed when an event occurs. So we just do like acc.i add event listener. We'll use the click attribute, and then we're going to create a function that will now handle the clicking and displaying of the panel. So we'll say this.class list.toggle is active. What this does is toggle changes the visibility of what is selected, so it'll be hidden or shown. And then we'll create a variable called panel for the panel class that we made earlier. We can say next element sibling. What this does is the next element sibling property returns the element immediately following the specified element. So then you can use this panel variable to say like panel if panel.style.display, if that is indicated as block. So block means that the element is rendered. so it's rendered as a block level element, then you want to change that to the style.display to equal none. So if it's clicked on and it was already visible, then now it will no longer be visible. Otherwise, if it was not visible, then we'll change that to be visible. So we'll just set that equal to block. Yeah, so that is essentially what we need for the JavaScript portion. And then if we go back to experience.html, we are going to need to kind of almost like link that file to this. So to do that, we would use the script tag because we had just written a script and we want to use that script now. So script src equals, now we put the name of the file, so that's index.js. And then we just put the closing tag. So now if you save that and run it, or save it and refresh, and go to experience, it should open and close it for you. Yeah, okay, awesome. So yeah, now on click, you can view whatever is within the accordion. Any questions about that, let us know. Otherwise, that's about it for our presentation. Yeah, thank you all for coming. Thank you so much and for taking out like about an hour and a half of your time. We hope you learned a lot, and if you want to view the recording, please make sure to fill out our form. Let me send that really quickly in the chat.
Yeah, also please make sure to also fill out the feedback form, even if you don't want the recording. We really value feedback and would appreciate like, you know, any kind of feedback that you guys have. And also, I think we will find a way, in case you're interested in the actual code here, you didn't have time to copy everything down. We'll find a way to release that to you, just what we have right now. It's very bare bones, but it is kind of like it's a good place to start. And yeah, HTML, CSS, this is kind of just like the foundations, and there's a lot more that you can do in terms of styling, in terms of making it look better. And yeah, just in terms of creating a beautiful website.
Yeah, so thank you everybody for coming. If you have any questions, we will stick around for a little bit, and please let us know. Feel free to unmute, comment in the chat. Anything works.
Thank you guys so much for coming out. Hope you learned a lot and had some fun as well.
Thanks, guys.